It's the late 60s, and without any warning, rock and roll suddenly leaves the fast lane and slows down to pick up its country cousin. What happened next was one of the biggest turnarounds in the history of pop. By the end of the 60s, rock culture had started to burn out. Fueled by the agonies of the Vietnam War and the extremes of psychedelic drugs, the music became so intense, it was almost painful. It wasn't hard to see that the party was coming to an end, and the first to leave were the same American musicians who helped start it.
We could see it coming. We were aware of what was going on in the streets at the time and the kind of edgy mood that America was in.
What was harmless marijuana smoking in the early 60s had turned into a vicious, homicidal mindset.
Things were starting to spin a bit madly out of control. I think there was just an instinct, and I know it was a healthy instinct, to rein it in.
I have to say that none of these things were conscious. Nobody said, okay, now what we're going to do here is we're going to change everything. Now we're going to play a complete different way than what we did before. Nobody ever spoke those words. We just did it naturally. It's what happened. We moved from New York City to upstate New York to this quaint little art colony. The clubhouse effect of having a place out in the middle of nowhere, which in this case was this house called Big Pink.
Up on Cripple Creek, she sends me if I spring a leak. She mends me, I don't have to speak as she defends.
It was just great for getting rid of all the distractions and the atmosphere, too, of having all of this earthiness and nature around and separating yourself from the trendiness and what was happening. You know, I didn't care much about what was happening. I just wanted to do something that I felt was real. We were taking great pride in our musicality. And the music was coming out of us in a combination of all the above. There was gospel flavor to it, there was mountain music, there was Delta music, there was music that I grew up in from the reservation. There was all of these things, and I just kept throwing more stuff into the pot and mixing up this big gumbo. And the nature of the songs that we were writing were not jam session songs. They were precise stories and emotional experiences, and discovering the soul of the music was what was really important. Getting the song across with as much emotion as you could, that was the objective. Not flailing away and blasting the walls down. That had nothing to do with it any longer. When we were recording music from Big Pink, the song The Wait was one of those that I had on the back burner in case we got stuck on something and it just wasn't coming right. I thought, well, I can always spring this one out. When we recorded it and we listened to it, we thought, whoa, this works. And it was a song that we didn't try any other way either. We didn't try it slower or faster or different introduction or a shuffle instead of an eighth note or any of those things. We just played it that way, and it just came so natural. And that was always a good sign.
Take a load off Fanny. Take a load for free. Take a load off Fanny. And you put the load right on me. Crazy Chester followed me, and he caught me in the fall. He said, I will fix your act if you just take Jack, my dog. What did you say? I said, wait a minute, Chester. You know, I'm a peaceful man. He said, that's okay, boy. Won't you be Chester whenever you can? Take a load off Fanny. Take a load for free.
I think the band's first two albums were as important a pair of albums as from any artist. I think they signaled the oncoming of a different level of songwriting, musicianship, and a definition of a band. They were just so mature coming in, which is so against the characterization of most rock and roll bands, ragtag garage bands who were just there for the fun and the women and the money. The band had a much more serious agenda going.
The band were as important a part of this volte-face, of this reaction against very loud psychedelic sort of Fillmore West rock as anybody. And the impact of their first album, Music from Big Pink, was felt all over the world.
And you put the load right on me.
While the band were pioneering a new vision of American roots music on the East Coast, out in the West, the Byrds were also moving on, leaving behind the spacey rock and roll of 8 Miles High. Through the 60s, the Byrds had been at the forefront of folk and acid rock, but as the decade came to a close, they returned to the group's earliest influences.
We'd already known that country influence could work in pop music. We'd heard the Beatles song Act Naturally, and I'd written Mr. Spaceman, which was a 2/4. Hey, Mr. Spaceman, won't you please take me along? I won't do anything wrong. Kind of a countryish sound. And so we started going in that direction, and we decided to do an album in Nashville, and we ended up doing The Sweetheart of the Rodeo.
We didn't turn our back on the rock and roll world. We just took another step into another direction. The country world did not want to know about it, and we're very offended by that record.
When the Byrds arrived in Nashville, America's capital of country music, it was a town still living on faded glories, and at its heart lay the Grand Ole Opry, a music venue dedicated to upholding the traditions of the past.
We were one of the first bands to play the Grand Ole Opry, and it was a very foreign situation for a long-haired. My hair wasn't really much longer than it is now, but we went to the stage and we got out there and we played a couple of songs, and people would yell, "Get a haircut!" What's the matter? Did your barber die?
The bass player we had initially was Chris Etheridge, who had a long black beard and long black hair, and he had this great white suit on, and we were playing, and this guy's back there, this old truck driver, and he goes, "Get back on the cross!"
It was just a cultural thing where the country people didn't accept people who had done pop music. It was just the two worlds didn't connect.
I think we were really genuinely having a good time with the songs.
The Byrds had always enjoyed a close relationship with Bob Dylan, so it came as no surprise when he suggested they do a version of his You Ain't Going Nowhere.
I think coincidentally, we We'd just gone the same direction as he had. So when I heard You Ain't Going Nowhere, I thought that would be a perfect single, and we did it. And I messed the words up. I got them backwards, and I heard from him after that he wasn't happy about that. In fact, when he did it again, he changed the words around on pick up your money and pack up your tent. And I'd said pack up your money and pick up your tent. And so he went, pick up your money and pack up your tent, McGuinn. You ain't going nowhere.
Get your mind on winter time. You ain't going nowhere.
We were just out there searching and looking, and not in necessarily, I don't mean we were going, let's try this and see if this works, or let's hoist this up the flagpole and see if they salute this. That wasn't it. It was just this love of the music.
I don't care how many letters they sent. Morning came and the morning went. Pack up your suitcase, pick up your tent. You ain't going nowhere.
They enjoyed the ride for as long as it lasted, but frankly, it didn't sell. You know, they were just too early. The Sweetheart of the Rodeo was their worst-selling album.
I think that album influenced more musicians. It might have not have sold as much as the other Byrds album, but to the musicians coming along or kids wanting to pick up guitars, it really opened the doors for a lot of them. There's a lot of influence there.
Our doing country music did have an enormous effect on the pop field and later on the country field. We were doing a combination of country and rock, and we had long hair. We grew our hair longer, and we had beards. And then a lot of other groups came along and followed us, like the Eagles. And a few years after that, the actual country singers, the young generation of country singers, started growing their hair long and growing beards and playing identical music to what we had done in '68.
As the Byrds rediscovered their country roots, one-time band member David Crosby was considering his options after his personal problems had proved too much for the rest of the group.
By the end of my tenure in the Byrds, I had started using hard drugs already. And I was less than easy to deal with. So I did not actually leave the Byrds willingly. The Byrds came in the person of Christopher and Roger and said, we'd like you out of the group. And I said, well, it's a shame, you know, we make good music. But if that's what you want, that's what you want. Okay. And I said, don't you think, you know, that's kind of like foolish? And Roger said those words with which he will have to live forever. We'll do better without you. I used to think about that a lot when we were starting Crosby, Stills and Nash.
First thing that was interesting about Crosby, Stills and Nash was the name. It was very significant because it was more like the name of a law firm or an advertising agency than the name of a band, you know. Well, you know, all the other bands of the period would call themselves Iron Butterfly or Vanilla Fudge. You know, here was Crosby, Stills and Nash Incorporated, you know, and it was a very significant name because it sort of said, you know, you will acknowledge that this is a supergroup, that, you know, that these three guys have passed. They each have their own sort of CV that they've brought to this new merger.
When I got tossed out of the Byrds, I hit a very fruitful period of songs.
Guinevere had green eyes.
So when I encountered Stephen and Graham, I had grown considerably as a writer. And they gave me the freedom, the belief, the support, you know, to do that.
In the morning after it rained, peacocks wandered aimlessly underneath an orange tree. can't she see me?
I loved the first album. There's a lot of personal attachment to it because I was able to go to the Wally Heider studios in Los Angeles when they were putting it together. And all of the songs are classics, and many of them have stood the test of time.
It's been a long time coming.
What you heard on that record was what naturally happened when the three of us sat down and sang a song to each other. The first song that we ever sang together was In the Morning When You Rise. In the morning when you rise. Still sang it to me. I made up a harmony. We sang that for him. Graham, he said, do that again. We said, okay. He said, we finished it. He said, do it one more time. And we did it again. He said, okay, now do it one more time. And the third time, it sounded like that.
In the morning when you rise, do you think of me and how you left me crying?
It reminded people of the beauty of melody and harmony. It reminded us of what we had learned from the Louvin brothers and from the Everly brothers and from the Mamas and the Papas and just anybody who sings high harmonies and does it well.
I said, cry, my baby.
Whenever I think of that album, I think of Crosby, Stills and Nash in Laurel Canyon while on tour. You know, they would just repair to some friend's house, and then they would just break into song. Just the joy of singing was what they were about at the time.
You don't have to cry.
Effect on the most unlikely people.
It was fun to hang out with those guys because they would break into these names and sing this stuff. It sounded so good, you know. They'd say, "Hey, we could probably do that. We could probably do something kind of like that, you know. We can sing harmony too. Hell, you know. I mean, we don't have those kind of voices, but we can hit the notes."
With epic pieces like Dark Star, which were more jam sessions than songs, the Grateful Dead had taken acid rock to the limit. Having spent thousands of dollars trying to capture the excitement of their live shows on record, they were now badly in debt to Warner Brothers. It was time to come up with a new plan. Recalling their early days in bluegrass bands, Robert Hunter and Jerry Garcia knuckled down to write some real songs.
Well, the first days are the hardest days, don't you worry anymore. 'Cause when life looks like easy street, there is danger at your door. Think this through with me.
Part of it was expedience. Part of it was we'd spent so much time in the studio with our second two records, and spent so much money that there was no chance of ever making any money from the sales of the records. So we thought, well, we need to be able to make a record quickly, you know, or at least in less than a year. I talked to the guys, said, "Hey guys, why don't we approach this one as though it were like a country and western record, or like California country and western, you know, like Bakersfield type, something like that. So that's lean and mean, and do things that reflect a kind of a basic approach to playing and to accompanying the songs."
Which is exactly what they did. In the space of a year, producing two acclaimed acoustic-based albums, Working Man's Dead and American Beauty.
It was really fun to write for that album. Hunter and I were living together in the same house.
Jerry always had such a cool approach to guitar. I was pretty slam bang in those days, and so you could hear me good. I'd be up there, and he'd be down there with that same thing going, you know. just being as cool. I'd hand this thing, and it was like telepathy, but I think it had to do with actual vibes of thumping on the roof and everything like that. Actual vibes as opposed to metaphysical vibes.
For the Grateful Dead's principal writers, it was an incredibly fruitful phase, and songs tumbled out in quick succession. Ripple, one of the most enduring, was written almost spontaneously on a visit to London.
I never have been able to plan what I'm going to write. Somebody asked me to write a certain kind of song with the best will in the world. I can only write the phrases that form in my head. And so I don't fight that, never have. Just let what comes into my head hit the paper, and I've had enough validation of this that it's become a very strong trait with me. I have confidence in what I write. This is my first trip to England, and I was on number 10 Devonshire Terrace, left to myself with a case of Retsina and some sun shining through the window. Now, I hadn't drunk the Retsina yet. I don't know if I needed to. And just looking out on the street there, if my words did glow with the gold of sunshine, and my tunes were played on the harp on string, would you hear my voice come through the music? Would you hold me as it were your own? It came out perfect. It came out in gold. It was, I was conscious when I was writing it that, well, I have to speak in metaphors, that there was gold dripping out of the pen.
Let there be songs to fill the air, rippled in still water.
It was fantastic. I still remember when they brought the tapes to Rolling Stone. They came to our office in San Francisco. These big old 12-inch reels, whatever they were. And they ran into Jan Wenner's office, our editor's office, and lit up a couple of joints and rolled the tapes. And we could not believe it, because we had all heard them on flatbed trucks in the Haight-Ashbury and in the park, and noodling endlessly on the stage of the Fillmore or wherever they happened to be, and doing the Trips Festival and the acid tests and all that kind of stuff. And this was like the flip side completely. And it just sounded beautiful. It was just beautiful. You just had to say, okay, forget all we have known about the Grateful Dead. They are now at another stage, perhaps a phase, but a beautiful phase it was.
As rock's innovators returned to the roots of American music, they opened the door for a new kind of artist.
I'm going to sing another new one now.
The once marginalized folkies were to re-emerge as singer-songwriters.
Neil Young really sort of put himself on the map as one of the leading solo figures, one of the kind of great lone wolves, if you like, of that period.
Here it is. This one's in G if anybody wants to blow along with me. I've been a miner for a heart of gold. It's these expressions I never give that keep me searching for a heart of gold. And I'm getting old. searching for a heart of gold, and I'm getting old.
Young's desire to stand alone reflected an exceptional ability as performer and writer, but he still lacked a platform to present himself to the world. And then along came Crosby, Stills and Nash.
You've got Crosby, Stills and Nash. You've got the most successful record in the country, in the world, at the time. And why would you bring another guy in? Because that other guy is that good.
I've been to Redwood. I crossed the ocean for a heart of gold.
He was great. He was a great songwriter. You know, there wasn't any question about it. He was. And we knew it.
I think that one of the unfortunate things for Crosby, Stills and Nash is probably that they asked Neil Young to join them. I mean, it was in hindsight, it probably didn't serve their long-term reputations very well, because, you know, I don't think many people would disagree that Young was far and away the major talent in that particular kind of quartet.
Once Young had made his mark with Crosby, Stills and Nash, he released a solo album, which seemed to define the whole idea of the confessional singer-songwriter.
After the gold rush, it's the sound of this kind of introverted, quite troubled dreamer with this sort of tremulous, angelic voice. You know, it was the sound of Topanga Canyon, if you like. The whole canyon thing in LA has always been incredibly important. When rock stars started making big money towards the end of the 60s, they probably still didn't have enough money to move into Bel Air or Beverly Hills, so they moved into the rather more funky kind of canyons where there was a more bohemian kind of vibe. You know, Laurel Canyon was just a beautiful place. You know, bands at that point were becoming big enough that it was difficult for them. They needed some privacy. It wasn't like 1965 and we're all in this together and the bands and the fans were sort of interchangeable. And then Topanga Canyon was a more sort of bucolic and removed version of Laurel Canyon. Topanga was hardcore country living. That was sort of going the whole way, and so that was where you'd find people like Neil Young, who always wanted to be on the outside of everything.
Thank you.
Neil Young's strategy paid off. But just as he was reaching a wider audience, a band of self-confessed Neil Young fans came up with a song about a horse and knocked him off the #1 spot.
On the first part of the journey, I was looking at all the...
Horse with No Name was essentially about the desert. That's all it's really about. I know there's always been the speculation that it's more than that and that it was drug-related and this and that. But that was it. It was a very simple song, couple of chords, and that memorable hook, la 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 la.
It's one of those songs, and I think we're very grateful to have had, at least one occur in our career. But when people come up and discuss that, very often they will add that I remember where I was the first time I heard it.
You see, I've been through the desert on a horse with no name. It felt good to be out of the rain. In the desert, you can't remember your name, 'cause there ain't no one for to give you no pain.
The world worldwide success of Horse with No Name suggested that the public at large were ready for California's new acoustic sound, and America took full advantage, coming up with a succession of simple but beautifully crafted pop songs.
The song was just this. Not just, but it just started with these chords.
Yeah, that's all it was.
Chewing on a piece of grass, walking down the road.
I remember vividly having this mental picture of that stretch of the coastline, traveling with my family when I was younger. Ventura Highway itself is not, there's no such beast. What I was really trying to depict was a Pacific Coast Highway, Highway 1, which goes up to the town of Ventura.
Ventura Highway in the sunshine.
That was the inspiration for the lyric. And I'm very proud of that song in the overall. I think it's withstood, it's still got that freshness about it. Even when we play on stage now at the ripe old age of, what are we, 48 or something, it still feels like kind of teenagers and free wind blowing through your hair, and so I think it did its job.
Alligator lizards in the air, in the air.
As rock music moved towards a more gentle, introspective style, so the cultural climate changed, allowing female performers to emerge from the margins of the folk scene.
Rows and flows of angel hair.
Singer-songwriters like Joni Mitchell suddenly found themselves center stage.
And feather canyons everywhere. I've looked at clouds that way, but now they only block the sun. They rain and snow on everyone. So many things I would have done, but clouds got in my way. Oh, I've looked at clouds from both sides now, from up and down, and still somehow it's cloud illusions I recall.
For me, some of Joni's early songs are a bit too just flowery and kind of twee. I mean, to me, she really comes into her own around the time of the Ladies of the Canyon album. And then by the time of Blue, there's this incredible sense of isolation almost that really sums up that singer-songwriter period. You know, it's very, very naked. It's like, you know, woman alone in room with guitar and piano and her thoughts and her soul searching.
The city from Canada via New York didn't just record there, she made the place an obsession in her music.
And I might have stayed on with him there, but my heart cried out for you, California. Oh, California.
Just as movie makers had turned their scripts and cameras towards the place they lived and worked in, so too musicians tried to make sense of a city full of contradictions. Of Los Angeles encouraged aspiring singer-songwriters to home in on the city, looking to find success.
I just wanted to sing and make some records, and then finding songs was not the easiest thing to do. So I thought it's probably easier to make some up than it is to go looking for them, you know. Then I kind of got into it, and there were some things that I've enjoyed saying, you know.
Ain't no sunshine when she's gone. It's not warm when she's away. Ain't no sunshine when she's gone. She's always gone too long. Anytime she goes away. Wonder this time where she's gone. Wonder if she's gone to stay. sunshine when she's gone, and this house just ain't no home anytime she goes away. I know, 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 I know. Hey, I ought to leave the young thing alone, but ain't no sunshine when she's gone. Ain't no sunshine when she's gone.
All the people that I worked with on my first album were already established people. Stephen Stills came in and played. That was nice of him. I mean, he was a big star. He didn't have to come in and play with me. Graham Nash came in because I was a little bit, you know, I don't know if I can do this or not. And Graham Nash came in, and that was in his drinking days. So Graham had socked a few down, and he came and he sat in front of me, and he kept saying, you don't know how good you are. Just go ahead and do your thing. So I thought that was very nice of him.
As Bill Withers grew in confidence and his songwriting matured, he looked to the gospel roots of his early upbringing in a small West Virginia mining town.
After my first record, I could afford a couple of things, so I bought a little Wurlitzer electric piano. And I sat down and I was looking for combinations of notes that would sound like a chord. And so my hand felt there, and I just... And I thought, like, okay. So I went back down. And so I thought, like, I could make a song out of that.
Lean on me when you're not strong, and I'll be your friend. I'll help you carry on, for it won't be long till I'm gonna need somebody to lean on.
Bill Withers' classic songs ensured he survived, but many didn't. With the movies and the music industry based in Los Angeles, it was an irresistible honeypot, though most would-be stars never even got a taste.
Every day, coming down the 101 and flying into LAX, there are people coming to Los Angeles who think they are going to be in the movies, who think they are going to be in the music business. Every pretty girl that comes from Idaho or somewhere thinks she's going to be either an actress or a model or something. And the reality of it is that's where we get all our waiters and porno actresses. And so that's the beauty and the tragedy of this place.
LA's netherworld between fantasy and nightmare provided the inspiration for some of the most innovative songwriters of the period.
LA it's the last stop before the Pacific Ocean, and it can be the most exciting place on the planet, and it can also be the most stifling. Many people came out, and I'm going to go out and be a star in Hollywood, or I'm going to be the best singer in Hollywood or something, and a lot of times Hollywood would just swallow you up. I said it in Sin City, it'll swallow you in. And it swallowed a lot of people.
This old town's filled with sin. It'll swallow you in if you've got some money to burn. Take it home right away. You've got 3 years to pay, but Satan is waiting.
Sin City lamented the greed and corruption of an industry which lured many talented artists to their downfall. It was the signature song from the groundbreaking album The Gilded Palace of Sin by the Flying Burrito Brothers, a Byrds offshoot band centered around the writing partnership of Chris Hillman and Graham Parsons.
Well, Graham and I had this wonderful affinity and shared this love of traditional country music. He did know what it was, and he understood it. And it was refreshing.
It seems like this whole town's insane. On the 31st floor.
Initially, on that first album, we wrote songs mostly in daytime, and we were sharing a home together. We were writing every day. It was the only time Graham was pretty coherent, and then I lost him after that.
Determined to live out the lifestyle of some of his hard-living heroes, Graham Parsons tragically OD'd at 26. But he left behind a musical blueprint which would help make another LA band the biggest act in the world.
I think the Byrds and the Flying Burrito Brothers, and to some extent Poco, did open the door for them. But they came along and they were a very tight, polished unit, and they were very good businessmen. I know Fry has said that before. He says, we were determined not to make the mistakes that the Byrds had made or the so-and-so had made, and they were right on the money.
The Eagles were different. They were made to sell 1 million records.
They were handsome, they were talented, they were in the right place at the right time.
The Byrds and the Flying Burrito Brothers may have been the first bands to play country rock, but it was the Eagles who took it to the mainstream. The immediate success of their debut single, Take It Easy, set a pattern which they would repeat right through the 70s.
I think it is always, it is the nature of the beast that things that happen on the margins are sort of subsumed by the mainstream and then appropriated and served up in more sort of digestible form. I mean, it's like, oh, this looks interesting. Let's see if we can, make it sell millions of copies. And we can sort of mould it in some way that the public will buy it. Ragged country soul becomes the sort of slick country pop of the Eagles.
I think country music's appeal is partly because at heart it is America. And the music itself, it's beautiful music. It sometimes draws almost a cartoon picture of America that appeals outside our borders.
The Eagles cleverly distilled country rock into a winning pop formula, taking their easy-listening version of it to a worldwide audience. The band achieved something else.
Born in the fields and listen to the rice when the
They opened a forgotten treasure trove of American music, and this was a legacy which would enrich pop culture for years to come. Guided by their instincts alone, they returned the song to its rightful place at the very center of popular music.
so good to me.
I've never really had a big strategy in mind. I just kind of followed the music always. And when I had something to write about, something to express, I thought that was the best time to make a record.
I will hear every word the boss may say. For he's the one who hands me down my pain. Looks like
There was no tricks. It was all about just writing songs that would have that timeless quality. This was like, okay, this is really who we are. Here it is. There's no frills, there's no tricks, there's no nothing. It's just the real shit, And that was as much as any of us ever really wanted out of music.
The band stayed true to their beliefs. When they felt they'd run their course, they ended both the group and an era with The Last Waltz, their final show in 1976. Unlike so many other artists, the band quit when they were still on top, content to leave a memory that was almost as perfect as their songs.